This is football. I'm Kevin Clark. Patrick Daugherty joins me momentarily to go through the best and worst coaches so far of 2023. This is a rollicking conversation. I can't recommend it enough. Want to do something quick on Brock Purdy. The is Brock Purdy getting enough credit discourse has swallowed itself. And I think we're doing it a week early. The Cowboys quit, and the Niners offense showed them that they're not the team they think they were. They thought they were, or what I thought they were, or what millions of Cowboys fans thought they were. Like, they're not on the top tier. We know that. And as soon as the arm punt happened in the second half, Dak and the rest of the team was like, yeah, we're good. We'll see later. That includes the defense. It's incredible that the Niners needed no extra effort to take out like Micah Parsons out of the game. That's incredible. But the Cowboys are not on the same level as the Browns defense. And that's the defense they're facing this week. Couple things to know. First of all, Kyle Shanahan said it's their offense's biggest challenge. That's true. Browns defense, first in EPA per play, first against the pass, second against the run. Against motion, they're allowing 4.5 yards per attempt against runs with motion. And Kyle Shanahan averages 1.5 yards more. The Browns defense is allowed, by the way, 1.4 yards per attempt without motion. So you're going to have to use motion, but even then, it's just okay. This is going to be massive. The Browns' third 3-and-out percentage is astounding. It is so much better than anybody in the league. Myles Garrett is a legitimate game wrecker, and Jim Schwartz's ability to get him in pure pass rushing situations, even with motion, even with misdirection, doesn't matter. He's going to get in the backfield. He's going to get upfield. So this, to me, is Brock Purdy's biggest test. But then beyond that, even if like Tom Brady out there on Sunday, we still have a long time to go in this discourse. And remember, everyone's talking about Tua, and Tua's in a very similar situation, except he was a top 10 pick. But Tua's been doing it now for over a year. He's been the best against every single coverage you can imagine. Man zone, every type of zone. Like, there's a real track record here. Brock Purdy's been doing it for significantly less, has not been a full year. It's been a winter into now an early fall. So we have a long way to go on that. And I would just caution, like, the MVP talk is extremely premature. Let's play a game. If Brock Purdy is the MVP, would Kyle Shanahan trade him for anybody? I bet he would. For the rest of the season? I bet he would. I bet it'd be a lot of quarterbacks. So Brock Purdy can't be the most valuable right now. If we get to a point where that's no longer true, then yeah, he is the most valuable. We can't turn the MVP into the Heisman, where it's just the quarterback on the best team. Can't do it. By the way, the Heisman looks like should go to Brock Bowers right now. But we can't do that, where team wins a bunch of games and we say, okay, this guy that's the Heisman. We can't do that. And so let's pump the brakes. The discourse has gotten, and like the whole thing about the Niners fans be like, give him credit. Oh, he's better than Jimmy Garoppolo. Well, guess what? Jimmy Garoppolo's not good. So I'm glad he's better than Jimmy Garoppolo, so we can at least start the discussion about how good he is. But Jimmy Garoppolo was bad too. That's why Kyle Shanahan kept trying to replace him, and successfully did it. So let's just pump the brakes on the discourse. Shanahan praise in the next segment. Here's Patrick Daugherty. Tickets to the game, merch, meals at iconic restaurants, stays at Caesar's Palace. All this can be yours when you bet with Caesar Sportsbook. Win or lose, every bet earns reward credits, which you can redeem across the empire. Now, if you haven't started yet, use the code OMAHAFULL and then place your first bet up to $1,250. If you win, great, you keep those winnings. But if you lose, you get your stake back as a bonus bet. All right, Patrick Daugherty's here, host of my favorite fantasy football podcast. I don't play fantasy, so I don't listen to that many. I listen to you guys and then my co-favorite show, the Ringer Fantasy Football Show, with my guys. And so I just want to have fun with my friends when I'm listening to a podcast like that. I'm not trying to get upset about Falcons running back usage like you guys, but I do get vicariously upset through you guys. What's going on, buddy?
Not much. And yeah, I mean, our mission for the show is it can be for ball knowers. It can be for non-ball knowers. We don't want it to be a clown show, but we want to have fun. And I always tell people, no one's ever going to pull over their car to like write down a stat, even though we have lots of like very esoteric stats on the show. and we just try to have a good time. And I'm very glad.
Have you ever pulled over your car for for anything that's ever been said on a podcast or the radio?
Paul, I was like, could tell I was about to faint. I pull over, on the side of Interstate 70 here in the St. Louis metropolitan region, and just take 10 minutes to regroup. I have never done that.
When I was really young, our next door neighbors told me a story about how they exposed they had like a hippie grandma who lived in Asheville, North Carolina, and they exposed her for the first time to Jeff Foxworthy, "You might be a redneck" jokes, and she thought she was laughing so hard she had to pull over. And so that's always stuck in my head that was the cultural shock that led to it. It was like one of those like YouTube like this guy hears Pink Floyd for the first time type of videos, but it was Jeff Foxworthy videos, jokes. And then I actually had to pull over one time when I was in college when Le Batard did a bit the day the Mitchell Report came out.
Oh boy!
And I was early in college. I just moved down to South Florida, and he was doing this report where they would just do this bit where they would just do random like news segments, just like not about the Mitchell Report. And then Le Batard would yell random people in the Mitchell Report to make fun of how ludicrous it was. And then he would play the theme from A Current Affair that was like it was a hard hitting thing. So it was like he would yell like FP Santangelo, and then they would do that. And it was such an involved bit. It made me laugh so much I had to pull over. So that's the only time I've ever had to pull over.
Mike Timlin. I never had to pull over for a podcast, but I've had.
This is radio. This is when Le Batard was on terrestrial radio. Yeah. This was at local radio at that.
No,
790 the ticket.
Never pulled over for a podcast, but no offense to the Ford Motor Company. My family was a Ford family, and they were turning out a lot of lemons around the turn of the century. So I had to pull over all the time. So we were always driving like Ford Tauruses that were just breaking down for no reason. But the Ford has really improved its product, I must say, in the past 15 years.
How are you liking the baseball?
A lot. It's weird because I live and die with the St. Louis Cardinals. I would give anything for them to be in the playoffs, but it is certainly much more enjoyable in some ways. They're not in the playoffs where, I view like every single pitch as a referendum on me personally. And I take, it's like my last bastion of homerism, that and Mizzou athletics. And I just live and die with it to definitely an unhealthy degree. Like it's the kind of thing where my kids who will see me like yelling at the television, and I'm not normally that kind of person, but I'm like a TV yeller. I'm a pacer. So it's nice. I would rather have them in there, but it's not bad to have a break for a year or two.
My dorkiest thing now in rooting is I realized I only root for like really advanced stats, high leverage plays, but like really like subconsciously. So like Miami will score a big touchdown, I just won't react at all. But then we'll get like a turnover like in the opponent's 20-yard line, and I'll yell ball because I know that's a high leverage play, and we're going the other way. All right. So real quick though, I will say this on the playoff. My only playoffs take is that I want to be a baseball dumbass. Like there's a direct train to Yankee Stadium. Teddy will probably be a baseball kid. A lot of baseball kids in my neighborhood here in beautiful Westchester County. And so I want to be a dumbass. I don't want to ever look on like, God bless our friends. Got a bunch of them at Fangraphs. God bless them. Never going to log on. I just want to crack open a cold one and say they can never get the big hit. And the Dodgers help me so much. Because they can never get the big hit. And it's the one team I'm 100% correct about.
No, and they give so much context. They can never get the big hit. They never have the starter go longer than like 5 innings anymore. Like every Dodger starter is going 4.
Well, they're not built for the playoffs is the problem.
No, they're not at all. They're like the Billy Bean.
They're not built.
They're like the Billy Bean A's, except for with a $300 million payroll instead of a $30 million payroll from 20 years ago.
All right, let's get to what we're actually doing today, which is not Le Batard terrestrial radio reminiscences. It's the best and worst coaches of 2023 so far. We're at I don't know what we'd call it. We're past the quarter pole.
I know the 18 weeks, 17 games is just totally screwed up. The quarter pole lingo has just been totally retired. And you're like, yeah, people I think have settled on. We're almost a third of the way through, I think is what people have settled on.
I saw Sports Center the other day kind of describing exactly what we're doing, where it's like, well, it's 4 weeks and a half. So best performers through, like giving out their MVP awards and stuff. They didn't really know what to say. All right. So we're going to go through, we have 6 categories here. I don't think there's a reason to do like, first coach fired or like, coach of the year predictions, all that stuff, because that stuff will be baked into our analysis over the next, hopefully, over the next.
Ron Rivera.
So it'd be funny if, All right, we'll start here. The best coach so far in 2023 has been whom?
This is the time of year where you can name 6 or 7 candidates. I thought about Mike McDaniel. I thought about Dan Campbell. I'll instead go with my sworn enemy, who I complain about nonstop because I don't really enjoy watching his offenses all that much, and he makes me so mad in fantasy. But if Kyle Shanahan has us debating the very final pick of the 2022 NFL draft, like whether or not Brock Purdy is elite, let's say he's not or elite, even good at all. I mean, I come down the side. I don't even know if he's good. If you're a good enough coach where you have the literal final pick of the draft generating fierce debate the following year, you're probably doing a pretty good job. And a roster that they got ready in almost every phase except for quarterback. And the only way that the roster could be ready was this if the coach does the all-time greatest job coaching this guy up, making him like a cog in his machine. That was the only way they could have success, and he pulled it off. This is just I think Shanny, he already knows he's the scheme guy. No one can scheme an offense better than Shanny. I think he wanted to move on from that. He understood that scheme can only take you so far. It can only take you to a Jimmy Garoppolo missing Emmanuel Sanders on a deep ball, and he wanted a talent who could actually do some elevating himself, and that's why he made the move for Trey Lance. But then it just didn't work, and he immediately goes back to making literal Brock Purdy a viable NFL quarterback, and I just have to give props to Kyle Shanahan.
So the Trey Lance thing speaks to something that I've talked about a lot, which is that I do feel like elite coaches get a little bored when someone does exactly what he tells them to do. So Drew Brees with Sean Payton and Tom Brady with Belichick, they're like, hey, this guy's doing exactly what we want him to do in peak efficiency, but what if we did something weirder? And that's how the Taysom Hill thing happens, right? And so Trey Lance obviously in college showed potential, and there's the idea that it wasn't going to be a scheme fit, it was going to be a scheme expansion, right? That was the big thing, scheme expansion. It's wait, why did we need to expand the scheme?
Yeah,
why did we need to do that?
I don't know if there's ever been more instant regret, and the injuries of course played a part in it, but Kyle Shanahan seemed over that pick by October of 2021. And like you said, he got 100%. Bored. Then he realized he was not bored at all, and that he does want to control every literal aspect of the offense. And he just wants someone to push the button. I kind of liken the 49ers. Going back to baseball, you know how now these days managers are essentially just ottomans of the front office. I don't know if I even used that word correctly. But managers are just every move is controlled by the front office. Shanahan is part of a school of coach in the NFL that I think is almost creating a front office manager dynamic between the coach and the quarterback. That's kind of how I view Shanny, that he's Brian Cashman, just ordering down to Aaron Boone, you got to put in this reliever now. And that's how he feels to me with Brock Purdy. And it's working.
I've got to say, this is the last baseball thing I'm going to say. It's because I live right near Yankee Stadium. Every single person online or in real life is I hate Brian Cashman and Aaron Boone more than any human being on the planet.
I know.
And then anytime I read a news outlet, it's just no changes expected, not even being considered.
You should wade into Yankees Twitter. Let's just say they were not low key in August and September. They were very, very high key about their feelings about Brian Cashman and Aaron.
It's like the Matt Millen era, except Brian Cashman accidentally has a couple rings. All right, so mine's Mike McDaniel. Only because, and maybe this is unfair, Coach of the Year, and again, I said we're not predicting this, but it's always a surprise award, right? It's always how much did you improve a guy? And all three phases seem good. The Dolphins defense will get better when Jalen Ramsey gets there. Vic Fangio normally takes a while to get a little better, and hiring Vic Fangio to begin with to raise the floor of the defense is really good. But the offense right now is just outrageous. They're averaging 8.4 yards per play on first down. So they're averaging basically a 2nd and 1, which allows so many different things available to you in the offense. And I was going to say they can just go deep on every 2nd down, but they just do that. They would do that anyway, and it would be successful. Their after the catch performance is so much better than anybody else in football. And I believe the Bears are second, which shows you that there's just this group of teams that are just totally average after the catch. And then there's the Miami Dolphins.
The Bears can also thank Emmanuel Forbes for that last week in his tackle attempts.
That's correct. That's correct. And listen, the Niners know how to find space as well as anybody, but I'm just stunned at the rise into the elite that the Dolphins have done. And so for me, it's like if I were to show you the tiers, the agreed upon tiers that we're all thinking about right now, which is the top teams in the NFL are like the Chiefs are basically grandfathered in, right? Are you still putting the Bills in there with the injuries?
I am. Because it's weird. I feel like they're finding their identity on offense again after they had an identity crisis last year. But yeah, every week, like a new like Pro Bowl level player. Like at each level, the defense gets hurt. But I don't know.
Yes.
Every team will have those level of injuries though by December, and the Bills are just
sure.
progressing.
Well, but the problem is Milano was the Dolphin stopper.
Yeah, he was. He is a lot of things stopper. That one.
Okay, so anyway, so let's put them for the sake of this exercise. Let's put the Bills in there. So Chiefs, Bills, Eagles, Niners, and that's probably it for me, for the top tier, and then the Miami Dolphins. So like if you're seeing that on July 15th and you're like, what happened here? Like how did they get in this tier? Like that to me is coaching. And that's why I'm giving him the edge right now. I just think he's done the best job. I think that we're seeing without injuries last year, he could have done something. He could have won a couple playoff games last year.
Won a road playoff game with Skylar Thompson last year.
That's exactly right. He is an astoundingly good coach.
Yeah, my thing on McDaniel. So first, just to jump a little ahead, we were going to maybe talk about a really specific coaching move we've liked this year, and mine was Mike McDaniel just making up a new position. I would say I don't know if I've ever seen the position before, where you get a running back to like the top speed of a golf cart before the ball is even snapped, and then you snap him the ball behind the line of scrimmage, and he just instantly goes 70 yards. Like to me, that is by far the best thing any coach has done this year.
I want to put a pin in that because we're going to talk about that for category 3. I have a lot of thoughts about that, especially with the track record of making up positions, which has never once worked in the history of football.
The webback says hello. Sorry. The webback.
We're going to call him a weapon. All right, let's move on to most surprising coach, which again, I mean, like I could say it's Mike McDaniel. It's not for me, but what do you got?
I took this. It could be positive or negative. I'm
100%
going in the negative direction of Bill Belichick, and it's not that I think Bill Belichick is suddenly like bad, or even that I necessarily think he's washed. But is Bill Belichick having absolutely nothing has really, really surprised me, and to see the Patriots just get truly blown out in back-to-back weeks, and just by teams that aren't even elite, like the Cowboys and the Saints are very much like the middle of the pack, above average. I view them as like 9 and 8, 10 and 7 teams. To see Bill have no answers, and Bill failed a really, really important test over the offseason. I don't think Bill is like getting exposed or anything like that, but it was a clear moment in time where Bill, he's almost never been confronted with this. He had to go outside his coaching tree, I thought, to get an offensive coordinator to do something to revitalize, modernize, whatever you want to call it, with his offense. But instead, he just kept going back to like his not failed ex-assistants, but ex-assistants that aren't really coming to town with the juice. And I thought it was a moment where he needed.
They're not failed, but they're not failing.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not. They haven't not failed.
He needed to follow the trends. He needed to for once be a trend follower and tap into that Shanny tree, tap into that McVay tree, and instead he just went back to the only thing he knows, and it's just working so horribly. It was his test of the 2023 season. He failed it before the year even began, and now it's going even worse than I could have possibly imagined.
All right, so I completely agree with you. If Bill Belichick weren't Bill Belichick, he would love to face Bill Belichick right now. Just how predictable he is, right? And that's the other thing I keep saying is like he's lucky that his boss isn't Bill Belichick, because he'd be like, well, this guy's out of ideas. Next, let's bring in Shane Steichen or whatever, something like that. So, all right, I have a couple here, and we'll run through it. First of all, on the surprising end, DeMeco Ryans.
Yes.
I didn't think they'd be this competitive this quickly, and I thought they were accelerating the timeline, and they did. Like when you obviously trade next year's pick for Wenders and all that stuff, but I thought that was gonna fail. Like I knew what they were doing. Like you ever see like, all right, this is the plan, but it's not gonna work, right? Like one time the Magic traded for Bismack Biyombo.
Oh, yes.
Or sorry, they traded for Serge Ibaka first, and then they had Serge Ibaka and Bismack Biyombo on the same roster. And the whole thing was like, well, everybody's going small. We're going to go big. We're going to go big.
Yes,
and it's like, I see what you're doing, but it's a bad plan.
Yes.
It's a bad process. I see a process, and there's like three things, right? There's like the teams with no process, the teams with a good process, and the teams who just have a really well thought out process, just really bad. And so I thought the Texans were in the Biyombo zone, and they're just not. They're a good team building something right now.
Yeah, the Texans, has trading up for an edge ever worked? I just feel like I feel like trading up for something is not a quarterback. Trading up for a quarterback quite often does not work. Trading up for an edge has literally never worked. So if Will Anderson works, that'll be something. And DeMeco, he was the new hire with the most unknown upside in a group that was like Sean Payton, Frank Reich, a couple of Eagles guys. I thought DeMeco, the buzz in DeMeco was like positive in a way that I could tell wasn't just like agent speak. I could tell like the league was really excited about DeMeco Ryans getting a head coaching job. So I was optimistic from that perspective, but it just didn't seem like this would be a team with 2 20-point wins so far.
Opposing coaches really respect DeMeco Ryans. And I think a lot of times, like, there's two types of I respect you coaches. There's one that's like old timer who's ready to like get his turn, this guy's put in the years. It's time for him to get one. And there's one that's like, this guy builds a game plan that keeps me up at night. And other coaches would rather have the first group populate the NFL. All right. So then I have a couple others. I honestly have to shout out, like, if you're telling me right now that the Cardinals would have a win over the Cowboys and then I'm looking at right now, only a minus 28 point differential, they're in this thing. And I think relative to the jokes we made, and like, I think, is it Chris Long who talks about the meme zone, where once you get no pushback on a joke, people just hammer it, like the Dave Gettleman thing. Yes. You can't get out of it because it's like, okay, well, Zach Wilson's there now. Where like you can make any Zach Wilson joke and not one person's going to be like, actually, if you look at this, and it's like there's no getting out of that zone. You just have to leave the industry no matter what. Zach Wilson has to leave the industry. The Jeff Fisher zone. Exactly right. So the Gannon is in that for me, where he is firmly out of the meme zone because we didn't have a big enough sample size in the meme zone for him to stay there. And then one more bad one. So is Frank Reich just not gonna do this?
No, he's not. And Frank Reich he's in a bad place. Where his press conference the other day, where he's basically like, I'm not saying David Tepper is Daniel Snyder, but David Tepper's Daniel Snyder. Like he seems like he is in hell. Where that was as close to a cry for help press conference I think you'll ever see in the NFL, especially in Week 6, where Frank Reich just seemed like he was almost in physical agony talking about his current situation.
I just sometimes feel like it's like when you sign a player, like when Belichick, he would sign like 5 guys and they'd all hit. They'd be like, they 34-year-olds, right? And then he'd sign like Ocho Cinco, and it's just like, no, he's not. Ocho Cinco just doesn't have it. He's not into it. We're done here. He's going to be inactive for a bunch of games. Like, sometimes you hire these retread coaches, and some of them are like really energized. They learn from their lessons. Frank Reich is just kind of like, oh yeah, I don't want to do this.
No, I know.
I'm going to go. No. I'm going to not.
No. To make a somewhat obscure reference, he's a bit in like the Carl Havoc zone right now, where he does not want to be on the Carolina Panthers sideline anymore. And he's
all right.
Yeah, he's struggling right now.
Let's talk about the most hyper-specific good coaching move. You have the floor, Pat.
No, it's Mike McDaniel. I have never seen. Why have more coaches not had a position where you get the fastest player in the NFL up to full speed before the ball is even snapped?
I've seen some cheating allegations on that particular play.
I feel like this is a trend I don't like. Is people like Zaprudering like. Snaps. The left tackle's false starting every time. Like, I don't know. I mean, I feel like the ref might know if he was false starting every snap. I'm not really sure about like the James.
We don't
Webb.
do false starts anymore.
No, we don't.
We don't do false starts or delay of game.
And to be frank, that's a great innovation. Like, is anyone actually upset about this? But why has someone not gotten the fastest player in the league up to full speed, like literal full speed, before the ball is even snapped, and then he scores a 72-yard touchdown? I have not seen a better specific coaching move all season than Mike McDaniel creating this position.
So there are 2 things that have never worked. Number one is guys who are, quote, an offensive weapon, and they come up with a new name
Truly
for the
never
position.
works.
It's never worked. It has never worked. The other one is any defensive player who is such a tweener that draft podcasts say, the first thing I'm going to do if I want this guy on my draft card is I want to hear a plan from my defensive coordinator. When that, like, teams should scout.
You should.
Teams should scout for that phrase on a draft podcast, and if they hear it, off the board immediately. Off the board. Because it's never anything other than, like, he can do two things, and if offenses put him out of his comfort zone, it will not work.
Steve Keim took 6 or 7 different shots on that and kept thinking, but it might work for us each time. And it just never ever did. And
Steve Keim all he did was just have his defensive coordinator in a lab, just being like, "What about this guy? Yeah. What about Dayon Buchanan? What about that guy?"
And
then
the coordinator's like, "Maybe just
TPS
get me an
report.
actual edge. Maybe just get me an actual safety. Like maybe I can do something with this, but I don't get paid enough for this. I'm a position coach."
Hey, I think hiring Jim Schwartz might be one of the best coaching moves in football. But everyone's talking about Vic Fangio. But Jim Schwartz is just like, what if we let all of these good guys on the Cleveland Browns, what if we just had them play well?
And that is getting into the Devin Achane zone too. We're like, well, what if we just put Myles Garrett somewhere where the defense or the offensive line literally can't block him? Like, how come no one's never done this before? And no one has blocked him through 4 games. And I'm really looking forward. As someone who keeps dabbling in Brock Purdy truthing, I am very excited about Myles Garrett facing Brock Purdy. I feel like we're going to learn a lot on Sunday.
Do you know who Harold Perkins is at LSU?
No, I'm not enough. I don't know enough of a ball knower.
So, like,
I know that I just
he was
lost
supposed
LSU.
to be. There you go. He was supposed to be like uber athlete, one of the best recruits in recent memory at an outside linebacker. Supposed to take a leap into like the top 5. Everybody was talking about it. So then week 1. Not that I have a vested interest in Florida State versus LSU. I would never root against another team. That would never happen, especially a team in the state of Florida. Would never happen. No. But I was watching this game, and Brian Kelly, whoever Brian Kelly's GC is, had Harold Perkins playing like Fred Warner or something. And it was just like, oh, they're zagging. And it's like, oh, wait, Florida State's going to win by 30 because he's playing in coverage and he's like doing all this weird off the ball stuff. And it's like, literally, they were just like, I think he rushed the passer like 3 times. And it was like their big scheme wrinkle. And it was like, what if we just sent that guy at the quarterback instead? And the whole thing was like, well, they don't want the quarterback to run. So we're going to have Harold Perkins spy. And it's like, I have a better idea than spy. What if you try to tackle him in the backfield? Because you have this incredible athlete.
Brian Kelly has been...
So that's it. So that's modern defensive coordinators, folks.
Brian Kelly's been having some innovations in allowing points this year, by the way.
It's bad.
Naturally, the first time they stopped anybody was in the second half of the Mizzou game. But I digress.
So I heard someone had told me in football that LSU didn't think they were ready for Florida State. Somebody told me that in the summer. Okay, the coaches. And then I've checked around. People are like, coaches are always bad at this kind of stuff. And like, they never really know because they don't really see any other teams. They never really know. Maybe they just have higher standards. Like the old broadcast news thing, right? We're like, am I slipping? Or is just people with high standards think they're slipping all the time? But it turned out that those coaches just saw Brian Kelly and were just like, no. We are not ready. So Jim Schwartz to me would be a hyper specific thing. I would say that Dan Campbell sending fantasy managers into the abyss with this David Montgomery thing is good. I'd say that the 3-2 Atlanta Falcons just driving everybody crazy still. What's the status on that? We have Drake London is being out targeted by like 11 people, right?
And they just acquired they're the ones who acquired Van Jefferson, right? Like they want to push him. He is further to fall still, Drake London. And that's really, I got to talk about Arthur Smith later in the show too. I'll just be honest. I'm saving an Arthur Smith rant.
Great. I'm just going through it here. I don't know, like, the opposite of this award is whatever the Bears have been doing with Justin Fields, where they, for 3 weeks, were like, the screen game is so close to working. It is so close to working. And if we call one more screen, that's when it turns on.
Yeah, that Matt Eberflus, talking about the 2 kinds of respect, like the young guy whose time has clearly arrived. And like Matt Eberflus was the opposite. He was a dues payer. and like he was a coronation of a coaching career hire, and it turns out that he was already at the top, highest rung of the ladder that he should be at, in my opinion. And who knows how much of this is the front office for the Bears, but I was just kind of like, what do you think's going to happen when you hire Matt Eberflus? Like, is this guy is the guy taking your franchise to the next step? I guess they pivoted better late than never, where they are now allowing Justin Fields to two really good matchups. Might have something to do with that, but they have a third really good matchup in the Vikings this weekend. I'm just not surprised that the Matt Eberflus hire turned out this way.
Well, the other thing about Eberflus is it was always like, the book on him was always like, well, it was a weird marriage because Josh McDaniel had hired him. Then he goes under Frank Reich, and they still make it work. And like that was the initial surprise that he was thriving in that environment. But like that's not enough to be like, no, this is the guy. This is the guy. It's like a mild surprise that he's pretty good is not enough to sort of buoy yourself into head coaching potential.
No, and by the way, another hyper-specific move I thought has been just not that the Eagles have throttled off being like pass heavy, not that they're ever pass heavy to begin with, but the Eagles just moderately struggling just a little bit with their passing offense. And Nick Sirianni's been like, well, we can be a running game Death Star 2 again if we need to be. And it's like, I see him like tweaking dials and knobs in like real time. And like they'll have 2 drives where like the passing attack does nothing, 2 drives where the rushing attack. I don't know if anyone can adjust week to week or drive to drive still better than Nick Sirianni and the Eagles.
I completely agree here. I can't get a handle on the Eagles, but I know that they're in the good process zone for me. Worst coaching job this season. This might be unanimous.
Well, no. I'm gonna throw you. This is the fantasy guy in me coming out.
But no.
Listen, I know they're 3-2. The Falcons.
Oh no, no.
Hold on. Hold on. I know they're 3-2. I know he's a ball knower. Arthur Smith does legit know ball, but he's the archetype of my least favorite type of modern coach, and that is where everything must be in service of the scheme. The scheme can never fail. It can only be failed. Like they resent players who like have the audacity to be good before they show up. Like if you're fast, that's actually bad. If you're tall, that's actually bad. Like everything has to be about serving the system. And I just, how does a franchise use 3 straight top 8 picks on a skill player? And then this is the result of that. He's getting dubs for now, sort of. But he thinks he's Kyle Shanahan. He's not Kyle Shanahan. And there's only a few coaches who really earn that right. And the coaches where everything must be in service of the scheme they've never been worse, and they are legion right now.
Okay, so I'm going to push back on that hard. Number one, he has Desmond Ridder as a quarterback, which again might be an Arthur Smith thing. He was rolling with them. Yeah. I saw someone, maybe it was Eric Eager, one of the guys like that, one of the stats guys, who was just like, has there ever been a quarterback who came in with no competition whatsoever, who was like pre-anointed, who's been as bad as Desmond Ridder?
Yes.
Where you're just like, nope, this is the guy, he's ready. And then he comes in and just awful. Like it wasn't like Zach Wilson this year where it's like, all right, well, he was supposed to do the backup. And then it's like, no, Desmond Ridder was like anointed. And also all Heineke rumors have been immediately squashed.
I know.
Immediately.
I know. I need him.
And so the one thing, if I were to criticize Smith on anything, the lack of entertaining the idea that the guys who are not getting any targets, who are unbelievable athletes, like the idea that they don't care, because that's always his answer, is like, ask Drake, ask Kyle, they don't care.
I know.
And it's like, and I've harped on this on the show before, but it's like, when those guys are supposed to get paid in 2 years or 1 year, like, is Arthur going to be like, well, here's your projected stats based on your athleticism? No, they're going to be like, you get 400 yards a year. Here's Dan Arnold's contract.
Yes, and he said that after a 0-catch Drake London game. The exact quote was, Drake doesn't care. And like, wouldn't that be bad if Drake London didn't care if he didn't catch it? And I will say too about Arthur Smith and the quarterback's alibi. That's like, it's compelling at first, but I think he's like an even more extreme version of Shanny, where he wants that kind of quarterback. He wants like one hand tied behind his back, basically, so he can be more center stage, and it can be more about his genius, like his adjustments, his audibles, his whatever, his blocking scheme for his receivers. And I just think he like embraces that. And he probably told the front office, I can win with Desmond Ridder. Like, you think I can't win with Desmond Ridder?
I have no doubt.
Yeah, and
I have no doubt.
He drives me crazy.
All right. Let's oh, by the way, the answer is Sean Payton.
I know. Sean Payton has gravely miscalculated, and no one has ever wanted to be on a boat in Lake Pontchartrain just fishing. Or I guess the Gulf of Mexico. He'll go out to the actual Gulf, do some deep sea fishing. No one has ever wanted to be deep sea fishing more than Sean Payton at this moment.
Also, Russell Wilson's playing okay.
I know. Well, what's the deal with Russ? Where he did this last year too, where it's more extreme this year, where he's pretty solid in the first half, and then after halftime, it's like the Ford Pinto has run out of gas, and like they have like nothing left, like no adjustments, no scripted plays left, obviously. And like I don't know if I've ever seen a more extreme like first and second half disparity in terms of offensive performance than Russ kind of last year, but definitely this year.
All right. We don't have to spend much time on worst coaching job because, again, I said it already. Dumbest thing a coach has done this season. I have two. What's yours?
My first was Frank Reich admitting that David Tepper is Daniel Snyder 2.0. Basically signed his death warrant. And, okay, Brandon Staley. I'm not necessarily a Brandon Staley hater, but Brandon Staley has let himself get so twisted up into knots about whether he's an analytics guy or whether he's not an analytics guy. And then he makes so many unanalytically sound decisions, and he gets buried for it. He gets criticized for it. And I feel like at the least opportune moments, he then lashes out. I'm like, you know what? I am an analytics guy. And the play against the Vikings, there's 2 minutes left. It's 4th and 1 on their own 24. And again, his favorite, I've tweeted this before, but his favorite 4th down play is always whatever the worst play in Andy Reid's playbook is. That's what Brandon Staley loves to approve to be called on 4th down. And I feel like he gets so tired of being accused of being an analytics trader that he, at the worst possible moments, goes what he thinks is analytics. And in that situation, he needed to punt the ball, and he did not. And he's so lucky they won that game against the Vikings.
But everyone's like, oh, they'd leave him on the tarmac if he lost that game. It's like, no, Spanos family is not going to pay out.
No, they're not.
It's not going to pay out a bunch of money.
No.
Someone said the other day that the Chargers have the lowest ticket price in the NFL by like a lot. I was listening to a Bengals podcast, no big deal, and they were talking about how they're raising ticket prices and that how the Bengals actually before this had really third lowest ticket prices, and the Chargers are just like totally bottom of the barrel. In Los Angeles, nothing is cheap in Los Angeles. Iced coffees are like $9, and you can go see Chargers with Justin Herbert throwing at Keenan Allen.
I'm not asking this as a bit. Do you think the Chargers are the 3rd most popular team in LA after the Rams and the Raiders?
No, I legitimately think it's more than that.
You think the 49ers more popular in LA?
Rams. Yes, I think it's Rams, Raiders, Niners.
Probably
I'd say the Chargers,
Cowboys.
But I was gonna say the Cowboys would not be far off, man. And like it's funny because the Raiders, I'd heard theories about how the Rams didn't want to share a stadium with the Raiders because of the dormant fan base that was there. Not dormant, they show up every time they play, but it's just like that'd be such a nightmare for them. Because I had friends who grew up without an NFL team, because most of my generation would have, right? Or like they were like 3 and they were like, what's going on? There's a football team here. It's leaving. Okay, see ya. And they all were hoping the Raiders would come back. These are normal, well-adjusted people who were just like, the Raiders are cool. It would be cool if they played in the stadium. So they actually waited to make sure that nobody else was coming. Because remember that the Raiders had the option if the Chargers didn't have option.
They did. I knew far too much about
this. Everybody
as a St. Louis resident.
Yeah, I remember. And so the Rams immediately exercised the option. There was no doubt there. But there was a year there where it was like, maybe the Raiders are going to come here. And they did not. And so now I don't think those people like football now. I think they were Raiders are football. Raiders are no football people. All right, I have 2 dumbest things the coach did this season. One might be unfair, but it's Robert Saleh doubling and tripling down on Zach Wilson. That might be a Joe Douglas thing. I'm gonna put it separate. Okay. Here's the actual dumbest thing. It's Mike, and this is something that I unfortunately bought into, and now I am just so viciously against it. It's Mike McCarthy saying, you know what this franchise needs? More Mike McCarthy.
No one has ever asked for more Mike. Kind of like no one had ever asked for more Bill O'Brien. They asked for less Matt Patricia. They had not asked for more Bill O'Brien. And
they were like, he was like, I got a play caller here that people like, and he's unfortunately scoring points, so we can't have that. But I actually think Kellen Moore is overrated. But I also think like the option is not the solution is not Brian Schottenheimer as like a guy who puts the cones out, right? And then Mike McCarthy saying, I'm here I come. And that has not paid dividends, I would say. Like you got to know your limitations. Like one thing, like I joked about this earlier, right? But like I'm a huge dumbass on baseball. So let's say Omaha or ESPN was like, hey man, we bench a little thin. It's October. A lot of people are traveling right now, so we don't really have anybody on Friday. We need you to do baseball tonight. We need you to pop in there to Seaport and do baseball tonight. I know my limitations. I wouldn't be like, it's me time. I would like say as few words as possible. I would just be like, Braves, and then I would just let.
You'd be like, I don't know if Cashman's done a good job.
A-Rod talk.
Yeah, I don't know if Cashman did.
I wouldn't even say that. I would just go Brian Cashman, and then A-Rod take it wherever he wanted to go. The other day, I had Mitch Schwartz on the show, and I literally, and not that I don't know football, I know like 4 things about football. But he's a literal former tackle for the Chiefs, and all I said to him was Juwan Taylor, because what I'm going to ask is not going to be a good enough question for someone who processes it and played the exact position. So that's my job. Just go, Juwan Taylor, here you go. Just start talking. And it was great. And he was amazing. And he talked about all the things. So Mike McCarthy is basically me when I'm talking to someone and I'm out of my depth, except Mike McCarthy was like, I'm just going to let this one rip this is going to be a Mike McCarthy centric franchise.
And it's not even like it's weird Hawaiian shirt, Mike McCarthy. It's just like the exact same giant winter coat, Green Bay, Mike McCarthy doing the exact same things that got him fired in Green Bay. And it's like so dispiriting, so tough there's like no upside to anything going on in the offense. So it'd be one thing, if he was trying to be like divorced dad Mike McCarthy, but he's just Mike McCarthy.
Right. Still. I saw he is going for it. There's like 5 teams tied with like having not gone for it this season on 4th down when they should, and the Cowboys are one of them. There's a couple of them, just like not once being like, I'm gonna go. I should go for it. I'm gonna go. For it.
If I have to proffer like a Mike McCarthy defense, the only thing I'll say is they have like it's been like illegal for them to have a normal game script this year, either negative or positive. Like they have yet to play like a single straightforward football game where they're either annihilating someone, getting annihilated, whatever happened with the Cardinals. I think there is hope with the Chargers this week. This really should be like a shootout of there just actually being a normal Cowboys game, and maybe we'll see a little more of Mike McCarthy's supposed plan.
All right, last thing for you. So reason I have you on, just so everybody knows, at Roto World and NBC Sports, is that you do a coaching ranking 1 through 32. And we've talked on my old show, we talked about how the worst shows are, the worst show is this one. Speaking of rankings, all podcast rankings, I saw the word shows as I was talking. That's like a classic, like 5-year-old, just like accidentally saying a word. And the worst coaches are better than they used to be. Yes. Like there's not a lot of pre-fired guys. Like there's the Josh McDaniels of the world, but like I would be surprised if Brandon Staley saves his job this year. There's no like pre-fired guys, right? But still, there's a lot of mediocrity in this league. And so anyway, the question is, which coach, good or bad, is going to move the most in Pat's rankings next time?
I'll give you 2 quick answers. The most good is going to be Mike McDaniel, because I was really excited about Mike McDaniel. It was 9-8, 1 season on the job. We've seen so many times where a guy will get off to like a hot start to their career, like they get immediately anointed. But I try to react slowly in the rankings, sometimes a little too slowly. I had Mike McDaniel only 17th. They could like lose. They could be like well under 500 the rest of the year, and I would still move Mike McDaniel up a lot because he's just clearly a special football coach. The one who I think might be in danger of a big negative move is do you know what's going on with John Harbaugh? It seems like bad luck. Like how many times can a coach be unlucky? So a lot of weird stuff. The Steelers game, they shouldn't drop 8 passes, but I got totally hung up on the late Lamar Jackson interception. I just casually heard, I think the announcer say, it wasn't an announcer, it was someone after the game tweeted, Lamar Jackson had never thrown an end zone fade in his entire career before. And John Harbaugh apparently John Harbaugh's not the play caller, but approved the first end zone fade of Lamar Jackson's entire career, like the most critical moment of the game, and he throws a pick. I feel like this stuff is happening to John Harbaugh so much the past 2 or 3 years that I'm just wondering if maybe it's not just bad luck and he's creating his own bad luck, and maybe he's getting a little bit of the Belichick syndrome where he was so good for so long, but is like out of answers for whatever the new stuff going on around him is. Even though he has like a progressive reputation and all that, yeah. I just feel like maybe he has lost his Ravens fastball.
Possible. Question for you that I didn't prepare you for. The best type of question, just completely reckless, throwing it out, putting you on the spot. It's called being a good host. Harbaugh and Belichick, let's say they're both in the open market in February of this year, January of this year. Who gets more calls?
Definitely Belichick. I think most people would still, maybe only the age would prevent that. I think a lot of people, myself included.
No, that's why
I still think a lot of people, myself included, would take 3 or 4 years of Belichick, and they would love a clean slate Belichick. Like the Belichick operation has like so many tentacles in New England at this point. Like you can almost see how they're having trouble rebooting and moving on from the Brady era because the roots are so deep where maybe even he fantasizes about having a clean slate somewhere. I think most front offices, most ownership groups probably know you don't really think further ahead than 2 or 3 or maybe 3 or 4 years anyway. And that Belichick is such a junkie. They know he's not going to like retire. And you probably view it as a 3 or 4 year proposition. I would take 3 or 4 years of Belichick over Harbaugh. I think most front offices would probably still convince themselves of that.
Roto Pat, he's got the pod with Denny Carter. I'm gonna listen to it. I guess I don't think you have a new episode out today. I listened to it yesterday.
We do have it. Not out today. We're recording a new episode out today, out this evening, out Friday morning.
Hurry,
Roto World Football
Hurry!
Show.
I'm going to the golf range later. I need to grind. Secrets in the dirt. All right, see you, buddy.
Thank you so much, as always. My pleasure.